I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Our big story tonight is the culmination of an issue that we've covered for months now, deflection. Multnomah County's long-awaited deflection center is opening a week from today. It's about a month and a half later than initially thought. It's a place for people to get connected with addiction services if they're caught with hard drugs, which is once again a crime in Oregon. But not everyone is eligible to be deflected away from jail and into treatment. Still, the opening of this center is a big deal. Blair Best, who has followed this saga every step of the way, brings us an update.
Just like the change in season, a change is coming to this corner of Multnomah County. On October 14th, this modest building in Portland's Central East Side will be where officers take people eligible for deflection, an option for those without active warrants whose only crime is possession of hard drugs. This deflection center was originally set to open more than a month ago on September 1st, when possession became a crime again in Oregon. But Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega-Peterson delayed the opening due to staffing shortages.
It's going to make a huge difference for law enforcement because law enforcement and our partners at the City of Portland have been clear with us. They need a space to drop off people who are eligible for deflection.
Starting Monday, the deflection center will be open from 7 in the morning to 11 at night, Monday through Friday, and until 3 p.m. on weekends. Security will be on site and patrolling the perimeter 24/7.
The deflection center is going to be operating partly based on when we're seeing the most demand for deflection services.
Services the county could not offer alone.
We're the architectural of record for the project.
Margaret Wilson is the principal architect Multnomah County hired to help find and design the deflection building and deal with permitting, among other things.
We've been designing their spaces and really looking, working in hand with the construction company to provide a quick delivery of service so that they could open as quickly as possible.
The plan is to add 10 reclining chairs to act as sobering beds early next year. But Wilson is also searching for a permanent drop-off sobering center where people can stay up to a few days, different from this deflection center.
We've been looking at anything from warehouse buildings that have limited walls on the interior to I think there was one that was more of an office building that we were going to renovate. And a project type like this really can make a huge impact on people's lives as they start their transition and really look at how this can be a great impact to our whole entire community.
All to help people like Steve, who stays busy clearing the sidewalk where he sleeps. It's a block away from the deflection center and under a billboard that warns of the deadly consequences of the drug he depends on.
I went from fishing commercially for 12 years, and I was about 50 days away from a 100-ton master captain's license, and I threw it away because I chose fentanyl.
Now he spends $50 a day on fentanyl laced with xylazine, or tranq, an animal tranquilizer that causes these open wounds on his leg.
So xylazine is, which people know as tranq dope. Our body doesn't really know how to, I guess, expel it, is what I'm told, and doesn't know how to filter it out, and so we get leg wounds, and they won't go away. It's painful. It's scary. I've wanted to quit for a long time, but the pain comes back.
Blair joins me now from outside the deflection center. Okay, Blair, a lot going on here. First off, I feel terrible for that guy at the end of your story, but let's focus for a moment on deflection. The building is opening Monday, but they've been doing street outreach in the meantime, so is that going to stop?
That's going to continue, Pat, but in areas like East County, where it's farther away and it'll take longer for first responders to bring people here to the deflection center. So instead, out there, officers will continue to call on outreach workers to meet people who they catch possessing and using hard drugs and who qualify for that option of treatment over jail. They'll call them to meet them on the streets, and that's what's been happening here in Portland.
All right, and how is deflection going so far in Multnomah County? Do we know, for example, if this is only happening for a handful of people, or is it a big number?
So on Friday, we got some numbers from Multnomah County on how this has been going over the past 30 days. And since September 1st, law enforcement has referred 71 people to the deflection program. And for those 71 people, outreach workers have made 136 referrals to services including detox, mental health, and housing. And here's how Washington County deflection numbers stack up to what we're seeing here in Multnomah County. In the first month of the program, 27 people were eligible for deflection and 17 chose to participate.
Okay, interesting. Now, back here in Multnomah County, the deflection center and referral to services, that's just one piece of the puzzle, right?
It really is. This deflection project is ongoing, and it's one that the county wants to grow. For example, starting next year, they want to open several sobering beds as they continue to look for a permanent sobering center where they will open up to 50 beds. And that's going to be a separate location than this deflection center, in a place that first responders can drop off people who are under the influence of drugs or alcohol. And that is part of the reason we wanted to sit down with that architect behind all of this, because she and her team are tasked with finding that location. And according to her, it's not easy.
So we need a building that is big enough. We wanted to go ahead and basically do a renovation of an existing building instead of building new. We need a building that's approximately 30,000 square feet. We need it to not be wood frame construction, because the wood frame construction would not be allowed for the use that we are using. And we basically need some good access, because we will have both law enforcement, EMS, community providers dropping off patients and picking up patients. And we need it to be in a location that has pretty easy access to a hospital, just in case.
All right, so once they find that perfect building in that perfect location, they haven't yet. They have a handful of options which they wouldn't share with us. But once they do, let's be real, they might likely face some pushback from the community. I mean, we've seen it many times before. We've seen it with the city-run tiny home villages. We've even seen it here with the deflection center. A preschool just down the street sued the county over opening this center so close to its playground. And that is a challenge that is not lost on the architect and her team.
This is a highly contentious project, and so when you look at that, not a lot of people want this directly next to them, and so there is going to be some give and take on the building and the building location. Every single time I go home, this is in the news, this is articles being written. It's definitely the most publicized project I've definitely worked on. But I kind of feel like we just, as a team, put our heads down and really look at what is the best way to design for the patients and for the staff that are going to be working in these spaces. And so kind of keeping our heads where the design should be for this project would be really what we're concentrating on.
Now, the search for that sobering center, we will be following that in the months to come. But in the meantime, here at the deflection center, Monday is the big opening day, and we'll be watching. Pat.
All right. Thanks, Blair. Appreciate it. Moving on now, more bad news from Oregon's motor voter program. We got our hands on the DMV's after action report, and it shows that even more people were registered to vote who should not have been. The state found an additional 302 people who did not qualify to be on the voter rolls, but were automatically put there after the DMV sent the information to the Secretary of State's office. Investigators checked to see if scanned copies of foreign passports were actually marked as U.S. passports, and they found 123 people registered in error. Another wrinkle involves people from American Samoa being registered as U.S. citizens. We just got our hands on the after action report late today. We're going to do a deep dive on all the findings tomorrow night, right here on The Story. Now let's get to some of your thoughts on our big story from Friday night that thousands of people have watched on our YouTube channel. We brought you our first look at preliminary toll prices for the current and new I-5 bridges between Portland and Vancouver. Right now they range between $1.55 and $4.70. That's one way to cross the bridge. But as we explained last week, these are not the final numbers. Those are expected sometime in the summer, with the tolling starting on the current bridges in the spring of 2026. And in case you're just learning about this, a Washington state law that authorized tolling on the I-5 bridge says that the Washington side of the I-205 bridge cannot be tolled. And on Friday, ODOT reiterated to us that as of now, they do not have plans to toll the Oregon side of the 205 bridge either. That led to comments like this one from Kim. Without tolling on I-205 as well, it will be an automatic nightmare. 1, traffic on I-205 will be a constant gridlock. 2, construction of the I-5 bridge will never be paid for due to the vastly reduced flow. We need to just suck it up and realize these aren't the quaint little towns that once were. A viewer named Roger told us that he would happily pay for a toll on I-5 if it meant he had to deal with less traffic.
I travel across the I-5 bridge every day, both directions. The return trip is always much slower, and I do not mind paying the toll. I believe that it takes everyone to help fund the cost of the new bridge. And if the 205 bridge is not tolled, I will gladly pay the toll on the I-5 bridge if it means less traffic over the I-5 bridge.
All right, thanks for that. But many of your comments on the I-5 tolls in general brought up the age-old conflict of Washingtonians crossing the Columbia to work in Oregon.
The reality is the people that are using the service, which is the bridge, need to pay for the bridge. We have people coming down from Washington to work in Oregon. They don't pay income tax here, and then they go back home. So I believe that tolling is legitimate, right, and should be the way it goes.
Actually, if you make most of your money in Oregon, you do pay an income tax. But moving on, a truck driver named Kyle who lives in Washington disagrees, writing, "This is so tone deaf. In an era where everyone is paying higher prices for everything, it's suddenly a great deal to tax drivers even more? No, the bridge should be built at no additional cost to the public, period. Find another way. Get additional funds from the federal and state governments." And we'll end on this voicemail from a lifelong resident of the Portland area named Paul, who says Oregon just needs to catch up.
Tolling. Why can't we keep up with the rest of the nation? We all do it. Anybody remember 1971 and before when you used to have to pay to go over the I-5 bridge at Jensen Beach? Everybody does it now. Why can't Oregon keep up with the rest of the nation with keeping up the bridges and the roads?
All right, Paul, thanks for that comment. Now, when it comes to revenue and funding for road projects like the new I-5 bridge, some Oregon lawmakers and ODOT leaders spent part of their summer on a road show around the state. 12 stops between June and the end of September, getting public input on how ODOT should be funded moving forward. Why does that matter, you say? Well, because ODOT has a big budget problem and a huge potential hole. Try $1.7 billion. ODOT's director is warned of things like layoffs and less snow plowing and pothole repair if the agency is not fully funded. So one of the hallmarks of the upcoming long legislative session in Salem is going to be a transportation funding package. The last time lawmakers achieved that was 2017, where they passed the largest package of its kind in state history, well over $5 billion. That's also the package that quietly included tolling as an option in the future. But in order to create any new taxes or raise existing ones, lawmakers need a supermajority vote in both the House and the Senate. So let's take a look at that. In the House, that means you have to have 36 votes. Right now, Democrats hold 35. A Senate supermajority is 18 votes. Right now, Democrats have 17. So, yeah, pretty close. Well, if they hold like that through this November election, or if Republicans actually pick up any more seats, then that means the Democrats would need to reach across the aisle and compromise. And we know how well that's gone in recent years. And that brings us to an article in Willamette Week that we think is worth your time. It comes from excellent reporter Nigel Jaquist from over the weekend. House Minority Leader Jeff Helfrich has thoughts on whether tolling can bail out ODOT. The transportation agency's financial picture is dialed. House Republicans will have a big say in any new funding package. As Nigel explains, these tax measures start in the House of Representatives, and if Democrats do not gain that supermajority in November, 36 votes, the leader of the GOP in the House, that's Jeff Helfrich, likely holds the key for ODOT's funding future. So, what does Helfrich have to say about funding ODOT in the next legislative session? Well, nothing's set in stone yet, of course, but if you'd like to hear his comments, Nigel's article has a video link. Just head to wweek.com. Coming up next on The Story now, we're kicking off a new series that takes a hard look at crimes committed by teenagers, which are on the rise in parts of the Pacific Northwest, how the numbers compare to last year and years past, what are the most likely causes, and what can be done about it moving forward. Part 1 is coming up when The Story returns. From carjackings to shootouts, police across the Pacific Northwest have seen an increase in serious crimes committed by teenagers and kids even younger. So tonight we're kicking off a three-part series from our colleagues at King 5 in Seattle. All summer long, reporters there have looked into this spike in juvenile crime in Western Washington. And while some of the data is focused on the Seattle area, there are themes and possible solutions that apply to all of our communities. Drew Andre brings us the first report in the series called Underage and Under Arrest.
You've seen the headlines. I've reported on it.
Well, Jake, that teen in custody is just 16 years old.
Kids committing violent crimes.
Our top story this morning, more gun violence at a Seattle school.
I got 5. Law enforcement experts across our region say the trend has hit a boiling point.
I've been with the Renton Police Department for 29 years now, and it is the worst that our officers have probably dealt with in that time. We were seeing kids as young as 12 and 13-year-old committing these crimes.
Renton Police Chief John Schultz says his city's stunned by the increase of juvenile crimes, especially the ones where kids are carrying guns. Renton data shows police were called to reports of juveniles committing crimes with guns almost 3 times more often in 2023 than the year before. This year, they've seen a dip, but the number is still almost double pre-pandemic statistics. One crime that really stood out, armed robberies at gas stations and convenience stores. The last 2 years, those went from almost non-existent to a serious issue among kids.
The brazenness, right? Youth going into a convenience store and doing an armed robbery on a clerk, and the impact that's going to have not only on that victim, but on our entire community.
It's not just Renton. We've gathered crime data in all 3 of Western Washington's most populated counties. In Everett, King 5 found before the pandemic charges against juveniles for gun crimes, robberies, and car thefts didn't surpass 25 in a year. In 2024, they're on pace for more than 80.
When you see this, what goes through your mind?
I think it goes to show, I guess, how accessible these weapons are to the youth when they shouldn't be.
To this young woman, these aren't just numbers, but her painful reality.
My name's Layla Adam. I'm 20 years old, and I'm the older sister of Mubarak Adam, who passed away, or was murdered actually, this January 23rd of 2024.
That day, 15-year-old Mubarak was with friends, waiting for a West Seattle Community Center gym to open to play basketball.
Seattle police are still searching for answers tonight after a teenager was shot and killed inside a bathroom at the Southwest Pool in West Seattle.
He was dead on scene. He never made it to an ER or to any emergency room.
8 months later, there's been no arrest.
So that's about as far as we know what has happened.
Those close to the investigation think there's a juvenile out there who hasn't been held accountable.
The mourning is constant. Sometimes you do get busy, and I wouldn't say you forget about it, but it goes to the back of your mind. But I think especially in happy moments is when you mourn the most. Sorry.
We're all asking the question, why is this happening? We spoke with 6 experts, from juvenile courts to law enforcement to community leaders. They believe there are 3 main drivers at the root of this crisis. Kids are getting easier access to guns. Current public policy calls for less accountability, and maybe most important, the lingering impacts of the pandemic. You said something to me that stood out, that the pandemic caused a bubble that has burst. Yes. What do you mean by that?
We are seeing young people who didn't have opportunities to engage with a caring adult. We are seeing young people that didn't have healthy meals. And when young people were faced with adversity, they went back to the skills that they learned in their trauma-informed spaces. Okay.
Antonio McLemore runs a community center that serves kids and teens in Tacoma.
Hello. Good morning. Good morning, good morning. A lot of these crimes are happening in my community. I know that there are a lot of these youth.
At the Eastside Community Center, there's a colorful mural. It represents the children in Tacoma who lost their lives to gun violence. A list more than 40 names and growing.
Elijah Crawford. I know Elijah Crawford.
Another documented phenomenon from the pandemic, more Americans bought guns and kids got their hands on them. Prosecutors tell us access to guns is driving the spike in serious crimes, and they're almost always stolen.
So when young people are displaying a behavior, they're trying to communicate. They are screaming from the mountaintop that they need help.
Macklemore says the kids using these guns often have something in common.
Because what you find is that there's a lack of caring adults that were in their spaces to help equip them to process through their emotions, to give them emotional language.
Back in Renton, the department was frustrated by arresting the same kids for serious crimes over and over.
What's happening with the system where, we're doing our piece arresting them, but then we're seeing them on a continuing basis.
Eastbound across.
This March, Renton PD decided they weren't going to simply arrest kids and move on anymore. They changed course to stay more involved, coordinating with prosecutors and showing up in juvenile court to advocate for tougher consequences.
Since May, we've seen a pretty drastic decline.
This is a reminder for me that there's still work to be done.
There's no easy solution, but everyone we spoke with agrees it's going to take more than just money and resources. The key is collaboration.
It can't just be the city's job. It can't just be the teacher's job. It can't just be the family's, the parents' job. We really need each other. We really need each other. And that's what I have hope for.
Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. For those of you watching online, we'll see you next time, however you find us. And for the rest of you watching live, Straight Talk with Laurel Porter's coming your way next. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30. Good night.